This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
Emily St. Aubert, a young woman of 17, stood at the precipice of a life-altering adventure. With her ailing father, Monsieur St. Aubert, by her side, she prepared to embark on a trek through the rugged Pyrenees that would test her mettle and shape her future. The morning air bit at Emily's cheeks as she cast a final glance at La Vallée, their beloved estate. Her heart clenched as Teresa, their loyal servant, dwindled to a speck in the distance. The old woman's tear-stained face etched in Emily's memory. The weight of farewell settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. As father and daughter ventured into the mountains, the world around them transformed. Jagged peaks thrust into the sky, their snow-capped summits catching the sunlight like beacons of hope. Monsieur St. Aubert, his voice barely a whisper above the wind song, found strength to impart wisdom. "Emily, my dear," he said, gesturing to the towering landscape. "See how the mountains stand firm against nature's fury. Let their resilience guide you through life's storms." Emily nodded, drinking in her father's words in the awe-inspiring vista. Her heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and trepidation as they navigated narrow paths that clung to the mountainsides like spiderwebs. On the third day, as twilight painted the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, danger reared its ugly head. A group of banditti materialized from the shadows, their eyes glinting with malice. Emily's pulse raced, but she drew strength from her father's calm demeanor. "We have nothing of value," Monsieur St. Aubert stated, his hand a comforting weight on Emily's shoulder. The banditti leader, his face a map of scars, studied them with narrowed eyes before waving them off. "Move along," he growled, "and count yourselves lucky." As they hurried away, Emily released a shaky breath. The encounter left her trembling, but kindled a spark of resilience within her. Their resolve was tested further when a tempest descended without warning. The sky turned the color of slate, and rain lashed at them with unbridled fury. Lightning split the air, illuminating their treacherous path in terrifying flashes. "Stay close, Emily," Monsieur St. Aubert's voice barely carried over the howling wind. They pressed on, clothes plastered to their skin, spirits dampened but not extinguished. Just as hope began to fade, a flickering light pierced the gloom. A rustic inn appeared like a mirage, offering sanctuary from the storm. They stumbled inside, grateful for the warmth that enveloped them like a comforting embrace. The innkeeper, her face etched with kindness, ushered them to a room. Emily tended to her father, her gentle hands soothing his feverish brow. As she watched him sleep, worry gnawed at her heart. His cough seemed to worsen with each passing day, a constant reminder of his fragility. Their journey took an unexpected turn when they encountered a shepherd family. The simple folk welcomed them with open arms, offering a respite from the hardships of the road. Emily marveled at the joy radiating from the shepherd's children as they frolicked with lambs in the meadow. Their laughter was a balm to her weary soul. "See how little they need to be happy," Monsieur St. Aubert observed, a wistful smile playing on his lips. "There's a profound lesson in their contentment, Emily." As they continued their travels, Emily's bond with her father deepened. Every conversation, every shared moment of wonder at nature's grandeur, wove their hearts closer together. She found herself memorizing the lines of his face, the timbre of his voice, sensing that their time together was precious and fleeting. They explored ancient ruins, their crumbling stones whispering tales of bygone eras. In remote villages, they were welcomed by people whose lives seemed untouched by the outside world. Each experience was a brushstroke on the canvas of Emily's character, preparing her for the challenges that lay ahead. As they stood atop a hill, gazing at a valley bathed in golden sunlight, Emily felt a profound shift within herself. The journey had changed her, molding her into a young woman ready to face whatever life might bring. With her father by her side and the lessons of the mountains etched in her heart, she looked to the horizon, ready for the next chapter of their adventure. As the sun dipped below the peaks, casting long shadows across the valley, Emily's eyes were drawn to a figure in the distance. A lone traveler, his silhouette sharp against the fading light, was making his way along the winding path towards them. Something about his bearing, the confident set of his shoulders, stirred a flutter of curiosity in Emily's chest. Little did she know that this chance encounter would set in motion a series of events that would change the course of her journey and her life forever. Emily and her father embarked on a journey through the picturesque countryside. Their paths unexpectedly intertwined with those of Valancourt, a young nobleman of admirable character. The sun-dappled path wound its way through rolling hills, the air thick with the scent of wildflowers and pine. Emily's heart fluttered as she stole glances at Valancourt, his eyes alight with enthusiasm, despite his limited means. His genuine kindness radiated from every gesture, every word. "Look there!" Valancourt exclaimed, pointing to a cluster of delicate blue flowers clinging to a rocky outcrop. "Alpine gentians. Rare beauties, aren't they?" Emily nodded, captivated not just by the flowers, but by the passion in Valancourt's voice. The harsh landscape seemed to soften around him, as if nature itself responded to his wonder. As they navigated the winding mountain trails, their conversation flowed like a clear mountain stream. Poetry, philosophy, dreams. No topic was too lofty or too mundane. Emily found herself opening up, sharing thoughts she'd barely admitted to herself. "It's as if the mountains strip away pretense," she mused, her cheeks flushed with more than just the crisp air. "Up here, we can be our truest selves." Valancourt's eyes met hers, a spark of understanding passing between them. "Precisely, Miss Emily. Nature has a way of revealing our essence." Their growing connection was tested as they faced the journey's perils together. One moment etched itself into Emily's memory with crystal clarity. The path narrowed treacherously, loose gravel shifting underfoot. Time slowed as Emily felt herself tipping backward, the world tilting dizzyingly. In a heartbeat, Valancourt's strong hand grasped hers. Their eyes locked as he pulled her to safety, their breath mingling in the thin mountain air. Neither spoke, but something profound passed between them in that silent exchange. Yet a shadow loomed over their blossoming romance. Monsieur Saint-Aubert, already frail at the journey's start, weakened with each passing day. Emily watched her father with growing alarm, her heart torn between newfound joy and creeping dread. "Papa, shall we rest here?" she asked, noting the pallor of his skin, the labored rise and fall of his chest. He waved her off with a wan smile. "No need to fuss, my dear. The air up here does wonders for the spirit, if not the body." But his brave words couldn't mask the truth. As Monsieur Saint-Aubert's condition deteriorated, they sought refuge at a nearby monastery. The ancient stone walls seemed to whisper promises of sanctuary as the monks welcomed them with gentle care. Emily spent long hours by her father's bedside, her small hand engulfed in his. She willed her strength into him, as if she could tether him to this world through sheer force of love. "Emily, my child," Monsieur Saint-Aubert called, his voice barely a whisper. "Come closer." She leaned in, her heart pounding. With failing strength, he entrusted her to her aunt's care. Then, his eyes burning with sudden intensity, he extracted a solemn vow. "There are papers, Emily. You must burn them without reading. Promise me." Tears stung Emily's eyes as she nodded. "I promise, Papa. I promise." The monastery fell silent as Monsieur Saint-Aubert drew his last breath. Emily's world shattered, grief a physical ache in her chest. In those dark moments, Valancourt became her anchor. His steady presence offered comfort when nothing else could penetrate the fog of her sorrow. Together, they walked the monastery grounds, selecting a final resting place beneath an ancient oak. As they stood hand in hand by the freshly turned earth, Emily felt a bittersweet mix of loss and gratitude. But time, relentless as ever, marched on. Emily's departure to her aunt's loomed near. She and Valancourt sought a private moment in the dappled shade of the monastery garden. "I will write to you," Valancourt vowed, his voice thick with emotion. "And when circumstances allow, I will come for you." Emily's heart soared and ached in equal measure. "I will wait for you, Valancourt, no matter how long it takes." Their words hung in the air, fragile yet filled with hope. As they faced an uncertain future apart, Emily clung to the memory of their time together, a bright spot in the darkness of her grief. The journey to her aunt's home in Toulouse stretched before her, a path into the unknown. As Emily boarded the carriage, a chill ran down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that something ominous awaited her at journey's end. The monastery faded into the distance, and with it, the last vestiges of the life she had known. Emily's heart sank as she approached the imposing facade of her aunt's home in Toulouse. The grand house loomed before her, its windows like judging eyes watching her every move. A chill ran down her spine, despite the warm summer air. She knew that beyond those ornate doors waited Madame Chiron, a woman whose vanity was matched only by her lack of sympathy. Taking a deep breath, Emily steeled herself for what lay ahead. The scent of roses from the manicured garden did little to calm her nerves. As she crossed the threshold, the air grew thick with the cloying scent of expensive perfumes and unspoken expectations. Life under Madame Chiron's roof quickly became a delicate dance. Emily's days blurred into a whirlwind of forced smiles and stifled sighs. She navigated the treacherous waters of high society, feeling like a sparrow among peacocks. At night she'd lie awake, her pillow damp with silent tears, as she longed for the simplicity of her former life. In stolen moments of solitude, Emily found solace in writing to Valancourt. The soft scratch of her quill against parchment was a soothing melody, a stark contrast to the harsh tones of her aunt's voice. These letters became her lifeline, a tether to a world beyond the suffocating walls of her new home. But even this small comfort was short-lived. One fateful afternoon, Madame Chiron discovered the correspondence. Her aunt's face contorted with disgust as she spat out, "A penniless suitor? My dear, you must set your sights higher. A niece of mine cannot be seen consorting with someone of such limited means." Emily's protest died on her lips, her aunt's ambitions leaving no room for matters of the heart. The young woman felt the walls closing in, trapping her in a gilded cage of societal expectations. Just as Emily thought her situation couldn't become more complicated, fate threw another curveball. Signor Montoni arrived in Toulouse like a storm on a clear day. Tall and imposing, with eyes as dark and fathomless as a moonless night, the Italian nobleman commanded attention wherever he went. Emily watched with growing unease as Montoni turned his attentions to her aunt. His words dripped like honey, his gestures grand and calculated. Like a spider weaving an intricate web, he ensnared Madame Chiron with flattery and promises of grandeur. "My dear Madame," he would purr, his accent adding an exotic flair to his words. "Your beauty outshines even the most radiant stars in the night sky." Madame Chiron preened under his attention, her cheeks flushed with pleasure. But Emily saw beyond the charming facade. In Montoni's eyes she glimpsed a coldness that sent shivers down her spine. It was the gaze of a predator assessing its prey. Despite Emily's misgivings, her aunt fell headlong into Montoni's carefully laid trap. Their courtship was a whirlwind of lavish parties and whispered promises. Before Emily could fully comprehend the situation, wedding bells were ringing, and she found herself reluctantly donning a bridesmaid's gown. The ceremony passed in a blur of satin and lace, the air heavy with the cloying scent of lilies. As Emily watched her aunt pledge her life to Montoni, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was witnessing the sealing of a Faustian bargain. With the ink barely dry on the marriage certificate, Montoni wasted no time in asserting his dominance over the household. His presence seemed to fill every corner of the once familiar home, transforming it into a foreign and hostile territory. Emily felt like a stranger in her own skin, her every move scrutinized by her new uncle's piercing gaze. Montoni's influence extended far beyond the walls of their home. He orchestrated elaborate social gatherings, parading his new wife and niece before a sea of unfamiliar faces. Emily found herself adrift in a world of forced laughter and veiled insults, surrounded by Montoni's associates who regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled contempt. In these crowded rooms, Emily had never felt more alone. The whispers followed her like persistent shadows. "Montoni's little ward," they would murmur behind ornate fans and crystal glasses. "I wonder what he plans to do with her." Their words chilled Emily to the bone, each syllable a reminder of her precarious position in this new order. She longed to confide in her aunt, to voice the fears that plagued her sleepless nights. But Madame Chiron, now Madame Montoni, had eyes only for her new husband. "Nonsense, child," she would dismiss Emily's concerns with a wave of her bejeweled hand. "Signor Montoni knows what's best for us all. You should be grateful for the opportunities he's providing." As Emily met Montoni's calculating gaze across yet another opulent ballroom, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of a precipice. With each passing day, the ground beneath her feet seemed to crumble a little more, leaving her teetering on the brink of an unknown and terrifying future. Just when Emily thought her world couldn't be turned upside down any further, a whispered conversation caught her ear. Montoni's voice, low and urgent, spoke of plans to leave Toulouse. "Italy," he said, "will depart within the fortnight." Emily's blood ran cold. Italy, so far from everything she knew, everything she loved. As the reality of this impending journey sank in, a single thought consumed her. Valancourt. How could she leave him behind? The weight of this revelation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She stumbled from the room, her vision blurring with unshed tears, knowing that come morning she would have to face the heartbreaking task of bidding farewell to the man she loved. Emily's heart shattered as she bid a tearful farewell to Valancourt. The impending journey to Italy with her aunt and the newlywed Montoni loomed before her, threatening to tear apart the tender bonds of love she had formed. Tears glistened on Emily's cheeks, catching the soft morning light as she gazed into Valancourt's eyes. Their hands were clasped tightly, as if letting go would mean losing each other forever. "I will love you forever," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The words hung in the air, fragile as spun glass. Valancourt's response was a fierce embrace, his words of devotion muffled against her hair, but she felt them resonate through her very being. As their carriage rolled away, Emily's heart felt as heavy as lead. The French countryside blurred past her window, a tapestry of greens and golds that she barely noticed. Her thoughts were consumed by Valancourt, the memory of his touch still lingering on her skin like a ghost. The rhythmic clatter of hooves on the road seemed to echo the beating of her aching heart. Their journey through France was marked by an increasing sense of unease. Emily couldn't help but notice the change in Montoni's demeanor. His once charming smile had twisted into something cold and calculating, like a snake coiling before it strikes. He spoke in hushed tones, his eyes darting suspiciously at every turn. The air around him seemed to crackle with barely contained malice. In Lion, a chill ran down Emily's spine, as if icy fingers had traced her vertebrae. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure. It vanished as quickly as it had appeared, melting into the crowd like smoke. The incident left her feeling watched, vulnerable, as if unseen eyes were constantly upon her. Marseille brought with it the salty tang of the sea and a new set of worries. As they boarded the ship bound for Italy, Emily's stomach churned with more than just seasickness. The voyage was tumultuous, waves crashing against the hull like angry fists, each impact sending shudders through the vessel. Madame Montoni's constant complaints echoed through their cramped quarters, her illness making her more irritable than ever. The close confines of the ship seemed to amplify every tension, every fear. Genoa rose from the mist like a dream, its colorful buildings and winding streets a feast for Emily's eyes. Yet even here, beauty was tainted by unease. Montoni's associates were a rogues gallery of suspicious characters, their whispered conversations setting Emily's nerves on edge. She found herself straining to catch snippets of their hushed words, each overheard phrase adding to the growing knot of dread in her stomach. As they ventured deeper into the Italian countryside, each inn they stayed at became a stage for Montoni's clandestine meetings. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls, turning familiar objects into menacing shapes. Emily's heart raced with each meaningful glance exchanged between Montoni and his cohorts, her imagination running wild with dark possibilities. The Alps loomed before them, majestic and menacing. As they ascended into the mountains, the landscape seemed to mirror Emily's growing dread. Jagged peaks pierced the sky like accusing fingers, while dark forests whispered secrets to the wind. The air grew thin and cold, each breath a reminder of how far they had come from the warmth and safety of home. Their journey through the mountain passes was fraught with danger. The narrow roads snaked along cliff edges, each turn a flirtation with disaster. Bandits were said to lurk in the shadows, their eyes gleaming with greed. Emily's courage was put to the test when their carriage wheel caught on a loose stone, sending them teetering on the brink of a sheer drop. Time seemed to stand still as they balanced between life and death, the abyss yawning hungrily below. It was only the quick reflexes of their driver that saved them from plummeting to their doom. Weeks of arduous travel had taken their toll on Emily. She felt as if she had aged years in mere days, her innocence stripped away with each passing mile. The girl who had left France seemed a distant memory, replaced by a woman who had stared into the face of danger and survived. And then, as if summoned by her darkest fears, it appeared. The Castle of Udolpho rose before them, a monstrous silhouette against the stormy sky. Its towers seemed to claw at the heavens, while its walls exuded an aura of ancient malevolence. As they approached the forbidding structure, Emily's heart pounded in her chest. Each beat a desperate protest against their destination. A sense of impending doom washed over her, as inescapable as the shadows that stretched across the land. The castle loomed ever closer, a silent promise of the terrors that awaited within its stone embrace. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she took in the full, terrifying majesty of Udolpho. It was more than just a building, it was a living, breathing entity of darkness and secrets. As the carriage drew nearer, Emily's eyes were drawn to a flickering light in one of the highest towers. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a figure silhouetted against the window, watching their approach. But in the blink of an eye, it was gone, leaving her to wonder if it had been real or just a trick of her frightened mind. With each turn of the wheels, Emily felt herself being pulled inexorably towards a fate she could neither understand nor escape. Emily's first glimpse of the Castle of Udolpho sent a shiver down her spine. The ancient fortress, perched atop a rocky precipice, filled her with a mixture of awe and terror as it loomed over the desolate landscape. The carriage wheels crunched on gravel as they approached the massive iron gates. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the creak of rusted hinges as the gates swung open. The sound seemed to whisper a warning, urging them to turn back while they still could. Emily's eyes darted from one crumbling turret to another, taking in the state of disrepair. Moss clung to weathered stone, and broken windows gaped like toothless mouths. The very air seemed heavy with secrets, pressing down on her as she stepped from the carriage. Montoni, his face an emotionless mask, ushered them inside. The courtyard stretched before them, eerily silent save for the hollow echo of their footsteps on worn cobblestones. Emily's aunt clung to her arm, fingers digging into flesh, betraying her own unease. "Welcome to Udolpho," Montoni announced, his voice as cold as the stone walls surrounding them. He gestured towards a group of men lounging near the entrance, their rough appearance and calculating gazes making Emily's skin crawl. "My associates," he added curtly. Inside, the castle revealed itself as a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Dark corridors stretched endlessly, their walls adorned with faded tapestries that seemed to move in the flickering candlelight. Grand halls, ghosts of former splendor, stood in decay. Dust motes danced in weak shafts of light, the only movement in rooms long abandoned to time. Emily was led to her chamber in a remote wing. The room was spacious but oppressive, heavy curtains seeming to absorb what little light filtered through narrow windows. As night fell, the castle came alive with strange noises. Creaks and groans echoed through the walls, and more than once Emily could have sworn she heard footsteps outside her door. Sleep eluded her. The unfamiliar bed felt like a raft adrift in a sea of darkness. Emily's mind raced, replaying the day's events, each shadow in her room taking on sinister shapes. Unable to bear the stillness any longer, she lit a candle and ventured into the corridor. The flame cast dancing shadows on the walls as Emily explored. Hidden staircases revealed themselves, leading to passages that twisted and turned, seemingly leading nowhere. The air grew colder as she descended, carrying the musty scent of long-forgotten secrets. During her nocturnal wanderings, Emily encountered the castle's inhabitants. The stern housekeeper hurried past, worry etched deep in the lines of her face. Annette, her aunt's new maid, proved more talkative, but her cheerful chatter was tinged with an undercurrent of fear. Other servants scurried about like mice, eyes downcast, their silence speaking volumes. With each passing day, Emily's concern for her aunt grew. Madame Montoni, once vivacious and confident, now seemed a shadow of her former self. Emily often found her staring blankly out of windows, lost in thoughts she refused to share. The isolation and her husband's increasingly cold behavior had taken their toll, leaving Madame Montoni a ghost of her former self. One particularly restless night, Emily's explorations led her to a forbidden room. The door, usually locked, stood slightly ajar. Heart pounding, she slipped inside. Moonlight spilled through a gap in the curtains, illuminating a veiled portrait on the far wall. Emily's feet moved of their own accord, drawing her closer. With trembling fingers, she grasped the edge of the veil. A voice in her head screamed at her to stop, to turn back, but curiosity overpowered her fear. She lifted the veil, and in that instant, her world changed. What Emily saw filled her with an inexplicable dread, a terror so profound it stole the breath from her lungs. Though she could not put into words what the portrait depicted, the image seared itself into her mind. It was as if she had gazed into the abyss, and the abyss had gazed back, revealing horrors beyond her comprehension. Emily fled the room, her candle extinguished, plunging her into darkness. She ran blindly through the corridors, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. As she finally reached her chamber, slamming the door behind her, Emily knew that her life would never be the same. The mysteries of Udolpho had only begun to reveal themselves, and she stood on the precipice of a darkness she could not yet fathom. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across her room, Emily realized with growing dread that the terror of the night before was only the beginning. The atmosphere at Udolpho had shifted, as if the very stones of the castle had awakened to some malevolent purpose. What new horrors would the light of day reveal? The atmosphere at Udolpho had taken a sinister turn. Emily found herself plunged into a world of terror and uncertainty, her once peaceful surroundings now a landscape of nightmares. As night fell, the stone corridors of the ancient castle came alive with an otherworldly energy. Haunting melodies drifted through the air like ghostly whispers, their origin impossible to pinpoint. Emily's heart thundered in her chest as she peered into the inky shadows, catching fleeting glimpses of spectral figures that vanished like smoke when she blinked. Sleep became a distant memory, her nights consumed by restless pacing and wide-eyed vigilance. During one of her anxious wanderings, Emily's trembling fingers brushed against something out of place, a hidden latch in the wall. With a soft click that seemed to echo in the oppressive silence, a secret passage yawned open before her. The musty air within carried the scent of long-buried secrets, beckoning her forward with promises of answers to the mysteries that surrounded her. Swallowing the lump of fear in her throat, she slipped into the narrow corridor, its cold stone walls pressing in on either side. What she overheard through the hidden passage chilled her to the bone. Montoni's voice, usually so controlled, dripped with malice as he whispered plans of criminal activities. The realization dawned on Emily like a creeping frost. She was trapped in a den of wolves, with nowhere to run and no one to trust. Montoni's true nature revealed itself in brutal fashion when he attempted to force Emily into a marriage with Count Morano, a stranger whose very name made her skin crawl with revulsion. Her refusal ignited a fire in Montoni's eyes, his threats hanging in the air like a sword poised to fall. Emily could almost feel the blade of his anger pressing against her throat. As if the fates conspired against her, Madame Montoni fell gravely ill, leaving Emily even more vulnerable. She felt like a sparrow with clipped wings, unable to fly from the circling hawks that seemed to grow bolder with each passing day. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated the castle's grim facade, Emily's world tilted on its axis. There, in a flash of brilliant light that seared her retinas, she saw it, a ghostly figure, translucent and otherworldly. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving Emily questioning her very sanity. The thunder that followed seemed to mock her fears, its booming laughter echoing through the castle's empty halls. In her desperation for companionship, Emily found solace in Annette's presence. The servant girl's eyes sparkled like candles in the gloom as she shared local legends and ghost stories about Udolpho. Though the tales sent shivers racing down Emily's spine, they provided a strange comfort. At least she wasn't alone in sensing the castle's dark energy. Emily's nights became a torment of terrifying dreams. Shadowy figures chased her through endless corridors, their laughter echoing off the stone walls like the cackles of demons. She would wake gasping for air, sheets tangled around her legs like grasping hands trying to drag her back into the realm of nightmares. During the day, anxiety gnawed at her insides like a ravenous beast. Every creaking floorboard, every whisper of wind became a potential threat. Montoni's anger loomed over her like a storm cloud, ready to unleash its fury at any moment. Emily's nerves were stretched to their breaking point, her body taut as a bowstring about to snap. As Emily explored the castle's dusty corners, she uncovered clues about its dark history. Faded portraits seemed to follow her with accusing eyes, while crumbling documents hinted at the tale of Signora Laurentini, the previous owner who had vanished without a trace years ago. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Laurentini's fate was somehow entwined with her own, like two strands of a rope twisted together by cruel hands. The oppressive atmosphere of Udolpho seemed to seep into Emily's very bones, a chill that no fire could warm. Each day felt like a battle against an unseen enemy, testing her resolve and pushing her to her limits. Yet even as fear threatened to consume her, Emily found reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. With trembling hands but steely determination, she prepared herself to face the unknown terrors that lurked in the shadows of Udolpho. As Emily stood at her window, watching the sun sink below the horizon and plunge the world into darkness once more, a sudden realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. The walls of Udolpho weren't just her prison, they were closing in, and time was running out. With a sharp intake of breath, Emily knew that she had to act, and act soon, or risk being swallowed whole by the mysteries that surrounded her. Emily's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the urgency of her situation. The full weight of her predicament at Udolpho settled upon her like a suffocating shroud, each passing moment amplifying her awareness of the dangers that lurked within the castle's oppressive walls. Emily's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the urgency of her situation. The full weight of her predicament at Udolpho settled upon her like a suffocating shroud, each passing moment amplifying her awareness of the dangers that lurked within the castle's oppressive walls. The stone corridors seemed to close in around her, their chills seeping into her bones. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, transforming familiar objects into menacing shapes. Every creak of the ancient structure sent a jolt through her body, her nerves raw and exposed. The very air felt thick with malice, as if the castle itself conspired against her. In the sanctuary of her chamber, the flickering candlelight cast an amber glow on the worried faces of Annette and Ludovico. Emily's voice trembled as she shared her daring plan for escape, her words barely above a whisper. The loyal maid and kind-hearted servant leaned in close, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. "We must act now," Emily breathed, her fingers twisting the fabric of her skirt, "before it's too late." Together they combed the castle with painstaking care, their search for salvation growing more desperate with each passing hour. It was Ludovico who first noticed the slight unevenness in the tapestry adorning Emily's chamber wall. His calloused hand brushed against the fabric, causing it to ripple. "Miss," he whispered urgently, "look here." With trembling hands they pulled the heavy tapestry aside. The hidden door groaned in protest as they eased it open, revealing a secret passage that stretched before them like a ribbon of darkness. The air that rushed out was damp and musty, thick with the dust of ages. Emily's heart leaped with hope. "This is our way out," she said, her voice barely audible. Over the next few days they gathered supplies with the utmost caution. Every stolen moment was fraught with danger, the threat of discovery hanging over them like a sword. Bread and cheese were squirreled away in pockets and folds of clothing. Warm cloaks were bundled together, hidden beneath loose floorboards. A weathered map of the surrounding countryside, procured at great risk, became their most prized possession. On the night of their escape, nature itself seemed to rage against Montoni's tyranny. Thunder crashed overhead, each boom reverberating through the castle's stone walls. Lightning illuminated the grotesque gargoyles that leered from the battlements, their faces twisted in eternal snarls. Emily's hands shook as she lit a single candle, its flame guttering in the draught from the hidden passage. She turned to Annette and Ludovico, their faces pale in the dim light. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. They nodded, fear and determination warring in their eyes. The secret passage was a maze of darkness, their progress agonizingly slow. Emily led the way, one hand trailing along the damp stone wall, the other shielding the candle's feeble flame. The air grew thicker as they descended, the silence broken only by their ragged breathing and the occasional skitter of unseen creatures. Suddenly, a burst of raucous laughter echoed through the passage. They froze, hardly daring to breathe. Heavy footsteps approached, the sound of metal on stone growing louder with each passing second. Emily's heart thundered in her chest as she extinguished the candle, plunging them into total darkness. She pressed herself against the cold stone, feeling Annette and Ludovico do the same on either side of her. The footsteps drew nearer, then paused just beyond their hiding place. An eternity seemed to pass before the guard moved on, his steps fading into the distance. Emily released a shaky breath, her legs trembling with relief. They emerged into the howling wind, the taste of freedom sharp and exhilarating on their tongues. Rain lashed at their faces as they stumbled onto the treacherous mountain path, the rocks slick beneath their feet. For days they pushed onward, their bodies aching and spirits wavering. They sought shelter in abandoned shepherds' huts that creaked and groaned in the wind, or huddled in dank caves as storms raged outside. Every snapping twig or distant howl had them starting, imagining Montoni's men closing in. Their salvation came in the form of a group of peasants, their weathered faces creasing into smiles as they offered shelter and guidance. In their simple kindness, Emily saw a glimmer of the world she had almost forgotten existed beyond Udolpho's walls. The small village they were led to was a haven of normalcy after the nightmarish castle. Emily's last coins secured them passage on a ship bound for France, a final gamble for freedom. As they boarded, the weight of their ordeal seemed to lift slightly from their shoulders. Standing on the deck as the ship set sail, Emily watched the Italian coast recede. The silhouette of Udolpho, once so dominating and terrifying, grew smaller and smaller. A complex cocktail of emotions swirled within her. Relief at their escape, pride in their courage, and a gnawing uncertainty about what lay ahead. As the castle finally faded from view, Emily turned her face to the horizon, ready to embrace whatever challenges the future might hold. But as the ship cut through the choppy waters, a sudden wave of exhaustion washed over her. The adrenaline that had sustained her for so long began to ebb away, leaving her feeling hollow and drained. Emily swayed on her feet, her vision blurring. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the concerned face of Annette rushing towards her. As she slipped into unconsciousness, a single thought echoed in her mind. Had they truly escaped, or were there greater trials yet to come? Emily's return to France marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Weary from her ordeal, she arrived in Languedoc with her spirit as battered as her physical form. The carriage wheels creaked and groaned as they rolled over the uneven country roads, each jolt a reminder of the long journey behind her. Emily gazed out the window, her eyes drinking in the familiar landscape of Languedoc. The gentle hills unfurled before her like a patchwork quilt of greens and golds, a sight that stirred long dormant memories of happier times. As the carriage wound its way through the countryside, Emily felt the weight of her recent experiences pressing down upon her chest, making each breath a conscious effort. The warm breeze that wafted through the open window carried the scent of lavender and sun-baked earth, a fragrance that whispered of home and slowly began to ease the tightness in her chest. Upon her arrival, news reached her that brought a glimmer of light to her weary eyes. She had inherited her aunt's estate, La Vallée. The realization washed over her like a warm summer rain, bringing with it not just the promise of financial security, but a newfound independence she had never known. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Emily allowed herself a small smile. At the gates of La Vallée stood Teresa, the faithful servant whose face was a map of wrinkles etched by time and worry. At the sight of Emily, those wrinkles rearranged themselves into a beaming smile. "Oh, Miss Emily," Teresa's voice quavered with emotion as she enveloped Emily in a fierce hug. "How we've missed you!" Stepping into the house was like stepping through a portal to the past. Every corner held a memory. Every room echoed with the ghosts of laughter and love. Emily's fingers trailed along the familiar walls, feeling the slight imperfections in the plaster that she knew by heart. The scent of lavender, her mother's favorite, still lingered in the air, and for a moment Emily could almost believe that nothing had changed, that at any moment her parents might walk through the door. As days melted into weeks, Emily began to find her footing in this new life. She threw herself into the management of her estate, finding purpose in the daily tasks and decisions. The rhythmic scratch of her quill on parchment as she pored over ledgers became a soothing melody, grounding her in the present. Old friends, like flowers after a long winter, began to bloom in her life once more. Their familiar faces and shared memories helped to anchor Emily, even as her mind often drifted to the tumultuous past. Their laughter over shared meals in the sun-dappled garden slowly began to chase away the shadows that had taken up residence in her heart. One crisp morning, as Emily sat in her father's study, surrounded by the comforting smell of old books and leather, a letter arrived that set her heart racing. The handwriting, so achingly familiar, belonged to Valancourt. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal, the sound seeming to echo in the quiet room. His joy at her safe return leapt off the page, and his declarations of unwavering love wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket on a cold night. Their reunion was set for a sunny afternoon in the gardens of La Vallée. As Emily waited, her stomach fluttered with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She smoothed her dress for the 100th time, her palms damp with sweat. When Valancourt appeared, time seemed to stand still. Their eyes met across the blooming roses, the sweet perfume hanging heavy in the air. In that moment, all the hardships and separations melted away like morning mist under the sun. They rushed into each other's arms, words of love and longing tumbling from their lips like water over stones. Yet even as Emily basked in the warmth of their rekindled love, a shadow began to creep at the edges of her happiness. Whispers like autumn leaves skittering across stone reached her ears. Tales of Valancourt during their separation, of gambling debts and questionable company, began to circulate through the community. Each new rumor was like a thorn, pricking at the bubble of her happiness. These rumors gnawed at Emily, eating away at the image of the honorable man she held in her heart. She found herself studying Valancourt's face during their meetings, searching for signs of the change others spoke of. Was that a new hardness in his eyes, a slight edge to his smile that hadn't been there before? Or was it merely a trick of the light, a projection of her own fears? Emily's nights became restless, her dreams a tumultuous sea of conflicting emotions. She would wake, tangled in her sheets, her heart torn between the love that burned bright and true, and the sense of moral duty that had been instilled in her since childhood. The moonlight streaming through her window seemed to mock her indecision, casting long shadows across her room that seemed to reach for her with grasping fingers. Her newfound independence, once a source of joy, now felt like a double-edged sword. The freedom to make her own decisions brought with it the weight of responsibility. As she navigated the complexities of society in her relationship with Valancourt, Emily felt as though she were walking a tightrope, with happiness on one side and her principles on the other. Each step forward was fraught with the fear of falling. As the sun set on another day of uncertainty, Emily stood at her window, gazing out at the darkening landscape. The cool evening air carried the distant sound of church bells, their mournful tones seeming to echo her inner turmoil. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as she made her decision. She could no longer ignore the whispers, no longer pretend that all was well. She had to know the truth, no matter the cost to her heart. Emily's fingers curled into fists at her sides, her jaw set with determination. Tomorrow she would begin her own investigation into Valancourt's past. As she turned from the window, her eyes fell on a small portrait of her parents, their smiling faces a reminder of the values they had instilled in her. She would not let them down, nor would she abandon her love without proof. With a mix of fear and resolve churning in her stomach, Emily prepared herself for what lay ahead, unaware of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of her quest for truth. Emily's heart pounded with a fierce determination. She set out to uncover the truth about Valancourt, knowing that discretion was her only ally in this delicate investigation. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across her chamber as Emily dipped her quill into the inkwell. Her hand trembled slightly, causing a small drop of ink to stain the crisp parchment. With a deep breath, she steadied herself and began to pen careful letters to mutual acquaintances, each word chosen with painstaking care. As responses trickled in, Emily felt a growing sense of dread. Each letter was like a piece of a puzzle she didn't want to complete, yet couldn't resist assembling. The picture they painted was one of a man she scarcely recognized, her beloved Valancourt, transformed by the glittering temptations of Paris. Whispers of reckless gambling swirled around her, like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. Tales of mounting debts piled up like storm clouds on the horizon. But it was the mention of a notorious countess that sent a chill down Emily's spine, as if winter had come early to her heart. In her mind's eye, she saw Valancourt in opulent Parisian salons, laughing with abandon as he tossed dice across green felt tables. She imagined him dancing with a beautiful, mysterious woman, their bodies moving too close for propriety. These visions haunted her waking hours and invaded her fitful dreams. The weight of these revelations pressed upon Emily like a physical thing, threatening to crush her spirit. Her love for Valancourt, once a warm and constant presence, now flickered uncertainly, buffeted by the cold winds of doubt and betrayal. With a heavy heart, Emily penned one final letter, this time to Valancourt himself. She requested a meeting in the garden where they had shared so many blissful moments. Now as she waited for him among the wilting blooms, the chill autumn air seemed to mock those memories of warmth and passion. Valancourt's familiar silhouette appeared on the path, and Emily's heart leapt traitorously in her chest. He was still handsome, still the man she had loved so deeply, but as he drew closer, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the slight stoop to his shoulders that spoke of a burden carried too long. Valancourt, Emily began, her voice barely above a whisper, carried away by the rustling of dead leaves. I've learned of your activities in Paris. The color drained from his face, leaving him as pale as the statues that dotted the garden. His eyes widened with a mixture of shame and fear that made Emily's heart ache anew. Emily, he started, but she pressed on, each word a struggle against the lump in her throat. The gambling, the debts, the company you've kept. Is it true? Valancourt's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of his actions had suddenly become too much to bear. Yes, he admitted, his voice hoarse and raw. But Emily, you must understand. As he poured out his tale of loneliness and despair, of how their separation had driven him to seek solace in the worst of places, Emily felt her resolve wavering. His words painted a picture of a man lost and floundering, reaching for any lifeline in a sea of sorrow. I was weak, Valancourt confessed, tears glistening in his eyes like morning dew. The thought of losing you, it consumed me. I sought distraction, anything to numb the pain of our separation. Emily's heart ached with sympathy, even as her mind recoiled at the choices he had made. She longed to reach out, to comfort him as she once had, but the chasm between them seemed insurmountable. It was as if they stood on opposite sides of a great ravine, with no bridge to span the gap. I'll change, Emily, Valancourt pleaded, reaching for her hand. His fingers were cold against her skin, and she wondered if they would ever feel warm again. I'll prove myself worthy of your trust once more. Just give me the chance. For a moment, Emily wavered on the precipice of forgiveness. But as she gazed into Valancourt's eyes, she saw not only remorse, but also a fragility that frightened her. How could she entrust her heart to someone who had faltered so easily? With a deep breath that seemed to draw strength from the very earth beneath her feet, Emily made her decision. I'm sorry, Valancourt, she said, her voice quavering but resolute. But I cannot continue our engagement. Not like this. The words hung between them like a death knell, shattering the last vestiges of hope. Valancourt's face crumpled in anguish, a sight that Emily knew would haunt her dreams for months to come. As they parted ways, each step feeling like a mile, Emily felt as though she were leaving a piece of herself behind. The journey back to La Vallée was a blur of tears and second-guessing, the countryside passing by in a haze of autumn colors that seemed to mock her grief. In the solitude of her childhood home, Emily grappled with the weight of her decision. The rooms that had once been filled with laughter now echoed with her soft sobs. She wandered the gardens, each familiar path a reminder of happier times, wondering if she had made the right choice or if she had lost Valancourt forever. Meanwhile, leagues away, Valancourt stood at a crossroads of his own. The pain of Emily's rejection burned like a brand, but from its ashes rose a fierce determination. He vowed to change, to become a man worthy of Emily's love and trust once more. As he set out on his journey of redemption, the road ahead seemed long and treacherous, but the memory of Emily's smile was a beacon guiding him forward, step by painful step. As the days turned to weeks, Emily found herself restless, her heart still raw from the wounds of recent events. The walls of La Vallée, once a comfort, now seemed to close in around her. She longed for escape, for a change that might soothe her troubled spirit. It was then that a letter arrived, its seal bearing the crest of the Count de Villefort. With trembling fingers, Emily broke the wax and unfolded the parchment, her eyes scanning the elegant script. An invitation to Chateau-le-Blanc. Could this be the respite she so desperately needed? As she penned her eager acceptance, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this visit would bring more than just a change of scenery. Little did she know that the shadows of Chateau-le-Blanc held secrets that would test her resolve and challenge everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the darkness that lurks in the human heart. Emily's heart, still raw from recent heartbreak, ached for a change of scenery. She eagerly accepted an invitation to visit the Chateau-le-Blanc, home of the Count de Villefort and his family, hoping to leave her sorrows behind in the embrace of new surroundings. As the carriage wound its way through the lush countryside, Emily felt her spirits begin to lift. The rolling hills, painted with vibrant wildflowers, seemed to whisper promises of new beginnings. The sweet scent of lavender drifted through the open window, mingling with the earthy aroma of sun-warmed grass. Emily closed her eyes, letting the gentle rocking of the carriage lull her into a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. When the ancient chateau finally came into view, its imposing silhouette etched against the setting sun, Emily's heart quickened with a familiar mix of excitement and trepidation. The massive stone walls of Chateau-le-Blanc loomed before her, their weathered surface a testament to centuries of secrets. Ivy clung to the facade like gnarled fingers, and Gothic arches framed windows that seemed to watch Emily's approach with silent curiosity. As she stepped from the carriage, the air around the chateau pressed against her skin, thick and heavy with unspoken tales. Emily shivered, despite the warmth of the evening. The very stones seemed to hold their breath, waiting. The grand foyer welcomed Emily with the soft glow of candlelight and the rich scent of beeswax. Count de Villefort, a distinguished gentleman with kind eyes and a welcoming smile, greeted her warmly. But it was his daughter Blanche who immediately captured Emily's attention. The young woman's eyes sparkled with mischief and warmth, a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere of the chateau. "Oh, I'm so glad you've come," Blanche exclaimed, clasping Emily's hands in her own. Her touch was warm, grounding. "I've been dying for a companion who shares my love for adventure." In the days that followed, Emily found herself swept up in the rhythms of life at Chateau-le-Blanc. The grand ballroom came alive with elegant soirees, candlelight dancing off gilded mirrors as the strains of a string quartet filled the air. During the day, she and Blanche explored the sprawling gardens, their laughter echoing through mazes of neatly trimmed hedges. Yet even as Emily reveled in her new surroundings, a nagging sense of unease began to take root. It started with whispers among the servants, hushed conversations that fell silent the moment she entered a room, leaving behind a palpable tension. Then came the music, haunting melodies that drifted through the corridors late at night, seeming to emanate from the abandoned wing of the chateau. One evening, as Emily and Blanche huddled by the crackling fireplace in the library, the distant strains of a melancholy tune reached their ears. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Do you hear it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the popping of the flames. "That music. It's so beautiful, yet so sad. Blanche's eyes widened, a mix of excitement and fear flickering across her face. They say it's the ghost of the White Lady, she confided, leaning closer. A spirit who wanders the halls searching for something she lost long ago. Emily's mind raced, memories of Udolpho flooding back with startling clarity. The rational part of her mind rebelled against such fanciful notions, but her curiosity burned ever stronger, like a flame that refused to be extinguished. Under the cover of night, Emily began her own investigations. She crept through shadowy corridors, her candle casting eerie, dancing shadows on the walls. Hidden doors yielded to her touch, revealing secret passages that snaked through the very heart of the chateau. In a dusty attic, she discovered a trunk filled with old letters and documents, the paper brittle and yellowed with age. As she carefully unfolded them, her heart pounding, she found hints of a connection between the Villefort family and the former inhabitants of Udolpho. With each passing day, the line between the natural and supernatural blurred. Emily found herself questioning her own senses, her rational mind at war with the inexplicable events unfolding around her. The very air seemed charged with an otherworldly energy, and she could feel the weight of centuries of secrets pressing down upon her. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated the grounds in brief, terrifying flashes, Emily caught a glimpse of a figure in white gliding across the garden. Her heart leapt into her throat as she pressed her face to the rain-lashed window, straining to see through the darkness. Was it merely a trick of the light, or had she truly seen the ghostly apparition of legend? The courage that had sustained her through the horrors of Udolpho was put to the test once more. With each creaking floorboard and flickering shadow, Emily steeled herself, determined to uncover the truth hidden within these ancient walls, no matter the cost to her peace of mind. As the storm raged on, Emily made a decision. She would venture into the abandoned wing of the chateau, the source of the mysterious music. With trembling hands, she lit a candle and stepped into the darkened corridor. The flame flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. As she reached for the handle of a long-forgotten door, a sudden gust of wind extinguished her light, plunging her into total darkness. In that moment of pitch blackness, Emily felt a cold hand brush against her cheek, and a voice, barely more than a whisper, breathed into her ear. "You're close now. Don't stop searching." Emily's persistent investigations at Chateau-le-Blanc were finally bearing fruit. Her tireless efforts began to unravel the mysteries that had haunted her since her time at Udolpho. The abandoned wing of the chateau loomed before her, a hulking shadow against the fading light of day. Emily's heart thundered in her chest, each beat echoing the creak of floorboards beneath her feet. The musty air clung to her skin as she pushed open a door, its hinges groaning in protest. The room beyond lay thick with dust and forgotten memories. Cobwebs stretched like ghostly fingers across corners, and the air hung heavy with the scent of decay. Emily's candle flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to reach for her with every step. There, hidden behind a tattered curtain, she found it, an old portrait that sent a chill racing down her spine. Her trembling fingers reached out, recognition dawning as she realized it was the same veiled painting that had terrified her at Udolpho. The room seemed to close in around her, memories of sleepless nights and paralyzing fear flooding back like a tidal wave. Emily's breath came in short, sharp gasps. "I must know the truth," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the oppressive silence. With shaking hands, she grasped the edge of the veil and pulled. The canvas revealed not a ghostly specter or demonic visage, but a memento mori, a stark reminder of mortality in the form of a decomposing corpse. Emily stumbled back, her stomach churning. Relief and disgust warred within her as the supernatural horror she had imagined crumbled away, leaving her with a new perspective on her past experiences. As the initial shock subsided, Emily's analytical mind began to whir. If this seemingly supernatural painting had a logical explanation, what other mysteries might be solved through careful investigation? The thought sparked a fire within her, driving away the lingering tendrils of fear. Over the following days, Emily immersed herself in the chateau's history. She sought out longtime servants, their weathered faces softening as they recounted tales of years gone by. Through hushed conversations and furtive glances, The tragic story of Signora Laurentini, the former owner of Udolpho, began to take shape. Emily learned of Laurentini's passionate affair with the Marquis de Villeroi, a love that burned bright but ended in heartbreak and tragedy. The servants spoke of Laurentini's subsequent disappearance, their words tinged with a mixture of pity and fear. Each new piece of information was like a puzzle piece falling into place, slowly revealing a picture Emily had never imagined. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, Emily delved deeper. In a forgotten desk drawer, she discovered a bundle of old letters, their faded ink telling a story of guilt, grief, and redemption. As she pored over the documents, her fingers tracing the delicate script, the pieces began to fall into place. Signora Laurentini, consumed by remorse, had sought solace in a convent. It was her haunting melodies that had drifted through the halls of both Udolpho and Chateau-le-Blanc, a spectral reminder of past sins. Emily's heart ached for the woman, understanding now the weight of secrets and the toll they could take. The ghostly apparitions that had struck terror into the hearts of so many were revealed to be nothing more than the clever tricks of smugglers. They had used the chateau's reputation for the supernatural to keep prying eyes away from their illicit activities. Emily couldn't help but laugh at the irony, her mirth echoing through the once frightening halls. As Emily unraveled the complex web of family histories and long-kept secrets, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The world around her seemed to shift, taking on new meaning as she gained a deeper understanding of the events that had shaped her life. The shadows that had once terrified her now held no power, banished by the light of knowledge. With each revelation, Emily's confidence grew. She was no longer the frightened girl who had first set foot in Udolpho, but a woman coming into her own, armed with knowledge and determination. The transformation was palpable, evident in the set of her shoulders and the fire in her eyes. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place as Emily uncovered the truth about her father's last instructions and the papers she had burned. Her heart ached as she realized they had contained information about her family's past and her own inheritance. Yet even this bittersweet discovery brought a sense of closure. Emily allowed herself a moment of grief for what might have been before squaring her shoulders and moving forward. As the sun set on Chateau-le-Blanc, casting long shadows across the grounds, Emily stood at the window, her mind awhirl with all she had learned. The mysteries that had once seemed insurmountable now lay bare before her, stripped of their power to terrify. She had faced her fears, uncovered the truth, and in doing so, had discovered her own strength. With a small smile playing on her lips, Emily turned away from the window, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But as she moved to leave the room, a glint of something caught her eye. There, tucked away in a corner she had overlooked, was a small, ornate box. Her heart raced as she reached for it, fingers trembling with anticipation. Could this be the key to unlocking the final mystery? As she lifted the lid, a gasp escaped her lips. The final mysteries of Udolpho unraveled like a delicate tapestry, revealing long-hidden truths. Emily received news that cleared Valancourt's name, bringing both relief and a flicker of hope to her weary heart. As she sat in her chamber, the soft glow of candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls, Emily learned the truth about Valancourt's past. The man she had once loved so dearly had indeed fallen prey to the temptations of gambling and accrued substantial debts in Paris. But like a ship finding its way through a storm, Valancourt had steered himself onto a path of redemption. The air in the room felt thick with anticipation as Emily absorbed this information. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a quill, her mind racing with thoughts of what to write. The rumors that had reached her ears, painting Valancourt as a man still mired in misconduct, were nothing more than exaggerated tales spread by those with murky motivations. With each word she penned, Emily felt as though she were building a bridge across the chasm that had grown between them. Her letter, infused with hope and tentative forgiveness, requested a meeting at La Vallée, the childhood home that held so many memories of innocence and joy. The day of their reunion dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself approved of their reconciliation. Sunlight dappled the garden path, and a gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming roses. Emily's heart raced as she caught sight of Valancourt approaching. He looked older, more weathered, but his eyes still held that familiar warmth that had first captured her heart. They met among the flowers, their conversation at first hesitant and fraught with unspoken emotions. But soon, like a river breaking through a dam, their words flowed freely. Valancourt's voice, tinged with remorse and hope, filled the air as he recounted his efforts to better himself. "I've paid off every debt, Emily," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've cut ties with those who led me astray. Every day, every moment, I've worked to become a man worthy of your love." As Emily listened, she felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. The sincerity in Valancourt's words, the determination in his actions, spoke louder than any rumor or doubt ever could. She realized with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating that her love for him had never truly faded. It had merely been buried, like a seed waiting for the right moment to bloom. Their reconciliation was like the first ray of sunshine after a long, dark storm. The joy that radiated from them touched all those around them, including Emily's dear friend Blanche and her new husband, Monsieur Saint-Foy, who were among the first to celebrate their reunion. As Emily and Valancourt began to plan their future together, their conversations were filled with laughter and shared dreams. They decided to split their time between the tranquil beauty of La Vallée and the promise of new beginnings at Valancourt's estate, a perfect blend of honoring the past while embracing the future. The day of their wedding arrived, transforming La Vallée into a haven of love and celebration. The old house seemed to come alive, its walls echoing with music and laughter. Emily, radiant in her wedding gown, walked down the aisle, her heart full to bursting. Valancourt waited for her, his eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. As they exchanged vows, the world around them seemed to fade away. Emily's voice, clear and strong, carried her promises across the gathered crowd. Valancourt's response was equally heartfelt, his words a testament to the strength of their love and the trials they had overcome. In that moment, as Emily looked into Valancourt's eyes, she reflected on the long and often treacherous path that had led them to this point. Every fear she had faced, every mystery she had unraveled at Udolpho, had shaped her into the woman she was today. She felt a profound gratitude for the strength and wisdom she had gained through her experiences, knowing that they had prepared her for this moment and the life that lay ahead. As the newlyweds shared their first kiss as husband and wife, a sense of peace washed over Emily. The shadows of Udolpho's mysteries had finally been banished by the light of love and truth. With Valancourt by her side, she was ready to step into a future filled with hope, adventure, and the enduring power of their love. The celebration continued long into the night, with laughter and joy echoing through the halls of La Vallée. As Emily and Valancourt danced under the starlit sky, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their bond stronger for having been tested by the mysteries of the past. And so, as the final chapter of their tumultuous journey came to a close, a new one began, one filled with promise, love, and the unshakable certainty that they had found their way home to each other at last.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.